Fantastic, what now, birth lab of me and thousands of others. We have been officially Christianed into the realm and the world of education. Right here we promised an oath, which is interestingly the only oath we do in our lives. When we do marriage, it's a vow, it's not an oath. I suppose there's a difference. Oath sounds kind of a bit more serious, even though in practical life it doesn't turn out to be that way. But it's the only oath, only swollen promise that we promise here that we are going to return back to society and not use our education to hurt. And I think we should start having institutions that take the diplomas back to people in break.
Amen.
As a macro philosopher, I'd like to look at the big picture, so I'm going to start reading. I consulted this with my dear friend Halep, so I'm going to start with the Big Bang. In 15 minutes, we're going to go all the way through the history of wealth of not just our Western society, but the whole universe. I now have a specific metric in which you can measure the GDP of the universe. So you're going to see where we are right now, and then I'm going to try to zoom on Europe and on this country and on education, how this is the only way how we can go forward in today's age of artificial intelligence. What sort of intelligence is not artificial? What sort of intelligence will be left with us, human beings made out of soft tissue and hearts, that AI cannot take over and do better in 1 out of 2 weeks? So, if you actually do go back to the beginning of the universe, some 13.7 billion years ago, in the beginning, the universe was very poor. Basically, there was nothing in it. And by nothing, I mean much bigger or smaller nothing than anyone of us can imagine. No light, no stars, no planets, nothing. It was just basically loose atoms of hydrogen, which is in itself the poorest atom that you can have. It only has one electron and one positron, and no neutrons even, to my great surprise. You can't really be any poorer than an atom of hydrogen. The universe was full of that. For hundreds of millions of years, there was nothing. And then out of the blue, all of these highly condensed atoms started forming into stars. Stars started exploding and creating heavier elements. And this happened over and over and over again. And as the universe went in time, it became richer and richer and more complex in its elements. At 1.45 billion years ago, this planet was created, which itself is the richest entity in the known universe. As you know, on this planet we have all the stable elements of the periodic table, and we're still looking for planets that have water. So congratulations, just by being made of Earth stuff, you are composed of the most sophisticated and most complex matter in the universe. Impossible to create outside of it. Not just the heart of the sun isn't enough to forge the elements that you're made of, such as carbon. You need that star to explode in a violent explosion of hypernova a couple of times to be able to have that amount of energy to forge your soft tissues. So now we have the universe rich with planets, with stars, with black holes, etc., etc. And on this one planet, something happened about 300 million years after the formation or cooling of the Earth, which is life. The most simplest amoeba, single cellular organism, is way complex organism than anything that we can see in the open universe. All the neutron stars, all the black holes, pulsars, you name it. That's simple compared to the most simple single-celled living organism. What's interesting is that it took us a long time as life or consciousness or whatever you want to call that, or intelligence perhaps. It took us a long time to start cooperating with each other. This is something that we economists like very much. This is our trick that we came and gave to the world, that we need to cooperate in order to be rich. You can't, make an economy. You can't even have currency if you're only dealing with yourself. This sort of, today we have this LinkedIn network. So these single cell molecules took 87% of the span of life on this planet was single-cell molecules, amoebas. Before they invented this LinkedIn thing, they started working with each other. And today, congratulations, your body is made of so many living cells, way more than the number of stars in our galaxy, in the numbers of multitudes. You are a perfectly balanced, self-reproductive. By the way, did you notice that even the most stupid people are able to reproduce? You don't need a university degree to create a child with any man or woman that you meet. In fact, the higher education we have in our heads, the less children we tend to have. But that's a different topic. So, and then life went on, and animals and life gained in riches of complexity and diversity, and we have millions of types of animals of all kinds of shapes and forms, and fish and birds, and every single one is unique and different, and in every single one there is a really special life hack that we go like, wow, wouldn't have thought of that. It's just amazing how these things actually made their ends meet. And then one day, or during some period, the way I like to look at it is that a certain type of animal was possessed by a spirit. This is how I like to look at human beings. Animals possessed by a spirit. It's a good spirit. It's a spirit that made us think even more complex thoughts than cows and vegetables. It's a very weird spirit that made us have problems with things that no other creature has. For example, we started, for reasons unknown till today, we started dressing up. Even though, for example, this room is warm enough for all of us to sit here naked. Why are you dressed? It's a crazy thing. It's like an animal got drunk and started putting things on them. I don't know why. Well, you know, the reason why you're dressed is not because you're cold or for biotic or biological reasons. The reason is that we became the only species out of all the millions of species on this planet that is naturally unnatural. So if you'd be naked here, you'd feel very unnatural. You feel much more natural when you're actually covered with things that we don't even know where they came from. In fact, I don't know who made this, and I wouldn't be able to reproduce it. Even with my PhD from this excellent university, I have no knowledge how to make a thing like this, let alone maybe a pen. I understand sort of kind of that there is ink inside, but that's about it. I am dependent on almost everything that I do on the outside world. And this is the trick, which then helped humanity become this rich. We are richer than we could ever imagine 30 years ago. Which one of you thought that you would have all the music of the world literally at the palm of your hand 30 years ago? Forget the stories and the fairy tales. Every single pensioner today lives a much richer life now, with all due respect, Charles IV, because he never had sushi. He never had 10% of the food stuff that we can have. Within 7 minutes, you can run a challenge. Somebody picks a really weird country food name, and I'll bet you that in 7 minutes you'll be able to have 7 portions delivered to your doorstep at almost negligible costs. So I like to look at the wealth of nations outside of just Adam Smith. I'd like to consider that a special subset of wealth. I'd like to look at the wealth of the universe. The universe started off very, very poor, and now the universe, at a certain small point, as a subset of it, evolved itself into this amazing order and richness of not just physical experience with our body, but also soul, and something that I call the spirit. Now, why do I have a special pleasure to welcome you here in Czech Republic, especially at this day and age, is because you're also, not only are we an exception when it comes to richness, and one of the sort of the main highlights for me, a lesson to take home from me studying the GDP of the universe, is that getting richer is not a feature of capitalism. Getting richer is not a feature of economics. Getting richer is not a feature of mankind. Getting richer is not even a feature of life or an exclusive feature of life. Getting richer is a feature of the universe. It was getting richer even before this planet was forged together. It was getting richer even before we invented Oxford. There is something that makes the universe richer and richer and richer. Now, we are now at the point of time where we think that this trend might stop because of something that happened in our lifetimes a couple of months ago. Our Western society is bifurcating into something that is now doubting itself. What Putin tried to do at the beginning of the attack on Ukraine to split the West, he didn't succeed then, but it's happening right now. This is exactly what was the wish. Now, why is this a special place? Because if you actually take the time and calculate the time-space of democracy in Europe, on European continent alone, forget the rest of the world, but just in Europe, what's the percentage, space-wise and time-wise, that democracy existed? So, since, let's say, 6,000 years ago, since the time that we started mastering writing to some degree. 2 cities, perhaps we would call them villages today, in Greece for 70, 80 years, somewhat democratic, even though only 30% of the population was actually eligible for voting. And then nothing. For 2,000 years, no democracy, nowhere. And then around 1800s, in our modern history, some countries for some time, even though even these 200 years of democracy have been shadowed by Nazi totality and communist totality. So, the number is less than 1%. It is not an automatic parking spot for a country for the car to park. If you let go of the steering wheel, it will not park in democracy. So what we have here is something unique, special, outstanding. It's an outlier. It's super duper rare, even in the history of Europe. Forget about other continents. Now, Czech Republic. Czech Republic, you know, in 1989 we all believed that democracy, this fantastic software called liberal democracy, will now just automatically spread like ChatGPT. In 3 months it will be used by everyone because it's just so convenient. It makes people free and rich. This dilemma that we have in our Western society all the way since the beginning of the Hebrew texts and Greek texts till Immanuel Kant, that wealth or earthly pleasures are in direct contradiction with moral qualities of your life. You have to choose one or the other. That thing was transcended by the genius of Adam Smith, who actually came up with a system that these two things go hand in hand. So in 1989, we had a revolution here in Prague. I still remember, I was 12. And there we had a great dilemma. The dilemma was, do you want to be poor and slaves? Or would you rather prefer to be rich and free? That was our dilemma in 1989. So of course we scratched our heads, opened our Excel sheets, made our SWOT analysis, and we chose to be rich and free rather than poor and unable to speak and travel. That wasn't really a dilemma. So this is exactly what is this miracle of the system that we invented, but it didn't really get exported since 1989. We believe that this would spread like wildfire. And Fukuyama was half right, half wrong. We did export capitalism everywhere. So democratic capitalism, capitalism that even built into communist China. I mean, what more can you say as a victory of capitalism when even communist countries adopt it? But democracy, not so much. China is today less democratic than it was 30, let's say in 95. Russia is less democratic. Hong Kong, Latin America, America. So if you actually look at the countries where both capitalism and democracy actually found a solid, strong root that is not doubted by anyone, you will unfortunately find that it's only about 5, 6 countries. Czech Republic, Slovenia, Baltic countries, and maybe Poland, even though they had a little dip Slovakia, oh, not sure. Hungary, no. Mongolia, maybe. But this didn't spread in the Arabic countries as we hoped during the Arabic Spring. This simply didn't export itself as much as we believed. What I want to say is that we live in a society which is rare. It's fragile, even though it's so fantastic. It is a system that will eventually win. There is no doubt about it. Václav Havel wrote a letter to Gustav Husák exactly 50 years ago in 2 weeks, where he was describing what happens to a society when you kill what he called the spirit. Every industry, every field has an elite. Not only academic elite or political elite, but there are elite among the microphone makers, there are elite among tailors, there are elite among carpenters, YouTubers, cooks and chefs. Every industry, every field of life has a small percentage of people who others automatically look up to for inspiration, for guidance, for gravity, for expressions, for perhaps even a way forward in that, let's say, carpenting field. What Václav Havel wrote to Gustav Husák 50 years ago is, if you chop down, or disable, or ridicule, or down, or shadow, or somehow cripple that small 0.5% of elite at the top of the triangle of every industry, the nation is lost. In fact, we had the honor of having the president of Georgia, Mrs. Zurabishvili, who was coup d'etat about a year ago by a totalitarian regime. She was telling us, this is what the totalitarian regimes do when they want to attack a free country, such was the case with Georgia. We saw it in our own eyes 50 years ago by the eyes of Havel. So Zurabishvili was saying, you chop down the elite of every field and industry. And do you know what you replace them with? Nothing. There is no need to import any foreign role models or ideological gatherings and whatnot. You just leave that country to boil in its own patriotism for 2 years, and you don't need to run that country over by tanks, which is expensive and ineffective, as we see in the case of Ukraine. You just ridicule and chop down the 0.01% of the excellence of the spirit, and that's enough to cripple a nation. To end on a good note, as I am in the middle of my speech, the optimistic ending will be brief, but the brevity will be compensated by the amount of optimism. I like to divide everything in existence as your favorite macro philosopher, because I'm the only one I am your favorite. I'm really proud that I invented this name. I didn't know what to call I've been called names, and I wanted to call myself some names. So macro philosopher is something that I invented myself. So as a favorite macro philosopher, I like to look at entities on 3 levels. Every entity has 3 components: body, soul, and spirit. Body is a conventional thing made out of matter, so this extends out something that is exclusive in time and space. Soul is something that is objective, but is not tangible. So for example, my speech is really real, but you can't really knock on it. Mathematics is another great example of something that's real. 1 + 1 is 2, I suppose everybody will agree on that. It's true, it's real, but it isn't real. Till today, we don't know how number 1 looks like. We don't know how 3 looks like. We know how 3 fingers, 3 cows, and 3 lights look like, but we don't know how 3 looks like. And we don't know how plus looks like. But that pluses don't exist in the world, nor do equals. There's no such thing. It's true, but it's not real. It's more real than the real, but it isn't really made of matter. Software is another example of soul. Laws, money, human rights, those are all software. That's something that you can learn, you can analyze, you can chop it down, you can put it in a freezer for half a year, take it out, and nothing will change. And the last element is the spirit. Spirit is also real, but not objective. So when you go to a concert, you hear the same violins playing the same notes, but you will love it and you will hate it. And when you get back home, you'll be talking about it in weird language. Well, it was still yellow. I didn't like it because it's really hard to talk about the Spirit. The Spirit is the only thing that will be left of us. 200 years ago, we stopped working with our hands. And we stopped making our bodies stronger. It was unnecessary. We moved, and the last 200 years, we've been strengthening our soul, which is we've been downloading information into our brains. We have been training the strength of our soul. And in the same manner, like machines have substituted our physical labor, the machines are substituting our mental labor. In about 2 weeks' time, coming to your new employer with a Harvard diploma, that actually was a standard you actually did remember when Adam Smith wrote his Wealth of Nations back in the day. That's what the diploma was worth. It's like me coming to a bank and making push-ups and trying to convince the HR board to employ me because I am a strong contribution to the team. I can carry 25 kilos up to the second floor without losing my breath and say a sentence this long. Okay, so what I really want you to work with all the people who care about the Spirit is we need to learn the non-machine thinking part of being human. We need to teach our students to decide to be good human beings, to be someone you want to be around with, to be able to control this immense power like our Spirit is able to control our knowledge. Just imagine what would happen with mankind had we invented the atomic bomb in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, if our knowledge exceeded our spirit, our morals, we would have destroyed ourselves without a question. And there's also no guarantee in the structure of things that we would not be able to invent an atomic bomb in the Middle Ages. But thanks to Spirit, it happened at the time that we almost used it. Well, twice we used it really, but never since. I would love for Prague to become again the center of education where we are able to grasp this. Prague, Czech Republic, and 4 other countries are a proof that it can be done. And now comes the optimistic final sentence. Even though we Europeans have a tendency to look down on us Europeans, we're the only civilization or empire, or whatever you want to call it, that has most of its enemies inside. Imagine how American Congress would look like if 23% of American deputies were against the United States of America and wanted to return back to the Confederation. Imagine that in Russia. And if you want the joke to continue, imagine that in China. Imagine that in African countries. Imagine that in, let's say, some Arabic countries. The system that we call the system of the European Union is the only candidate of all the systems that we have on this very planet at this very day to become the Salvator Mundi in terms of organization of free countries in a way that can be peaceful and prosperous for 70 years. Poor countries cooperating with rich countries, Western with Eastern, Southern with Northern. In a blood-riddled continent such as Europe, we have the proof of concept. It works. No other system is capable of doing this. We have a Russian system as a candidate, Chinese system, the Arabic system, the African system, the American system. None of that stands a chance to be a peaceful union of nations. And we've got this far without a single leader. For 70 years, we have not had a leader of Europe. This all happened very slowly, but very, very strongly in terms of making not only our bodies free, but also our souls, and most importantly, our spirits. I wish your spirit a lot of strength. Thank you very much.